Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. What a year it's been, and I can't even get myself into my suit these days. Let me start with macro thoughts. A measure of market fear is now at an unprecedented level. This is from David Inglis. Only 16 days ago, the US market was at a record high, the fastest time between a new high and a bear market in history. That's from Bianco Research. We're seeing absolutely wild swings in markets today. Friday, Australian stocks are now up 4.4%. after dropping as much as 8.1% earlier, by far the biggest intraday price swing on record. That's Tracy Alloway. US futures had a 6.5% swing up. This is chart language, but I'm also hitting psychological levels in my head. I give up. David Inglis. Yesterday, the Fed was ready to provide $500 billion a day for at least 3 days, $1.5 trillion of liquidity. In the next 3 days, they are prepared to do more QE than they did the last 5 years combined. Bianco Research market stopped functioning and they just threw the kitchen sink at it. The VIX, commonly referred to as Wall Street's fear index, is getting very close to the record high registered during the global financial crisis, Mohammed El-Arian. And this is all because of what became absolutely clear in February, is that we're dealing with a virus that has turned exponential and non-linear and is a pandemic. The markets emit the purest signal, and the market has had it with Narcissus. This is reality TV at a whole new epic Shakespearean level. Nouriel Joker Trump gave an empty buffoon speech on Wednesday and then did nothing on Thursday, and the market crashed. Nassim Taleb, Donaldo, if you own the market on the way up, you will also own it on the way down. And indeed, the viral moment has arrived. Joe Biden, we need to ensure that every person who needs a coronavirus test can get one, and that the test is free, period. And I responded by Biden boils down the issue to its essence. Dr. Tedros finally characterized COVID-19 as a pandemic 10 minutes past midnight. A V-shaped recovery, in my view, is an absolute fantasy. Keep an eye on the renminbi, which has been softening of late and is back over 7. On March 8, I said we'll be 5,000 points lower from here because the Federal Reserve is firing blanks, and I called it a debacle compounded by deluded linear leadership, and I think I wasn't wrong. Yesterday I saw a tweet from the New York Stock Exchange. Index has declined 7%, triggering a level 1 market-wide circuit breaker trading halt. And basically we've had trading halts the world over. I managed to catch a screenshot of Bitcoin right after it crashed through the $4,000 mark. At that time it was down over $3,718, about 48% on the day. Mishgare, we're currently at 5,175. 4th of November last year, I said I'm of the view that Bitcoin and crypto is a Jeffrey Edward Epstein and his cast of characters level con, and that it was breathtaking. and that I was having nothing to do with it other than occasionally looking in and admiring the sophistication and the level of the con. The Marketeer, before that collapse in the early hours this morning, put out a chart, never catch a falling knife, 5,175. I take you back to a deleted tweet that Bruce Fenton put out, which I managed to get a screen capture. He deleted it after 38 minutes. Yesterday, Italy's FTSE MIB was down 17% at the close, the worst single loss ever. Let's have a brief diversion into some home thoughts. A new study estimates that about 80,000 cetaceans are swept up every year by tuna fishing nets in the Indian Ocean. Dolphin numbers in the Indian Ocean may have dropped by more than 80% in recent decades, with an estimated 4 million small cetaceans caught as bycatch in commercial tuna fishing nets since 1950, according to a study. The authors say gillnet fishing in the Indian Ocean is effectively unmanaged and potentially the biggest unresolved issue facing cetaceans today. The study, led by Charles Anderson of the Manta Marine Organization in the Maldives, estimated that dolphin numbers had likely dropped to only 13% of their levels before 1980. What a tragedy. The study found that for every 1,000 tons of tuna currently being caught, about 175 cetaceans were also being caught. It's a painful death. Dolphins are clever, but because the net is very thin in the water, the dolphin sonar misses them. We met dolphins on the way to Wasini Island, and they are incredibly intelligent creatures. This is a short video I took. Ali, the navigator, was the fellow who took us to Wasini Island that day. And this is a photograph of the sunset on Wasini by Faith Kanja. And it is an extraordinary place to visit with the most delicious crab. Happiness consists in realizing it is all a great, strange dream. Jack Kerouac. And I sometimes wonder whether we'll all wake up and realize it has been precisely that. Torso of a protecting Buddha, Gupta period, 4th century, Jamalpur mound, Mathura now, in the Mathura Museum, William Dalrymple. And it's extremely sensual, isn't it? Every man and every woman is a star. I like that. Devoted yogi. Practice kindness all day to everybody, and you will realize you're already in heaven now. Jack Kerouac via the Brain Picker. The Dunning-Kruger effect, which I'd never heard of. A proficiency in metacognition, thinking about thinking. In other words, being stupid makes you too stupid to realize how stupid you are. G.S. Bogal. And in this world of linear thinkers, where we've gone totally non-linear, I'm sure that applies. Carlos Cruz Diaz, Physiognomy. This is in the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, in the United States. Looking at tweets as people react to the arrival of coronavirus in their countries, it's a textbook formula. It begins with jokes, memes, becomes fear and panic, and then, as now in Italy, it's just deep sadness. I've been following a gentleman, I believe he's a gentleman, A.A. Olomi, who speaks about jinns and magic, and it's been very interesting. And of course, jinns, as I said in an article, are made of smokeless and scorching fire. They are usually invisible to humans, but humans do appear clearly to jinn as they can possess them. Jinn have the power to travel large distances at extreme speeds and are thought to live in remote areas, so now you know. Just as Merlin is famous in European lore as a great wizard, so too do we find mages, witches, sorcerers and sorceresses in the Middle East and Islamic world. And this is a thread on the legendary and historic magic workers of the Middle East. One of the most famous jinn binders of his day, Muhammad al-Tabasi, lived in the 10th to 11th century. He is accredited with highly popular works on conjuration and sorcery. He was once asked to demonstrate his power and so conjured a jinn for all to see. Ibn Hilal was another famous talisman maker who learned how to bind jinn to his amulets. It was said he could construct the jinn through complex and secret talismanic operations. The Quranic figure Asif bin Barkia was the vizier of King Solomon. When Solomon desired to have the Queen of Sheba brought to him, he first asked his jinn. When they failed, Asif bin Barkia was able to transport the queen along with her throne in the blink of an eye. The Queen of Sheba herself is also credited with dominion over the jinn. Believed to be part jinn herself, her lineage granted her enchanting beauty and vast powers. With Solomon, she commanded the jinn Zaba to build vast palaces in Yemen. Another famed prophetess figure, Zaka al-Yamama, was born with supernaturally blue eyes. She could see the future and was gifted with great power. She used this to aid her tribe against their enemies. A rival tribe hatched a plot to circumvent her magic sight, and that took me back to Sadia, the magic of Sadia. The past is a dangerous business. Warned Akili Mali, it is best to keep it buried. Hundreds of hungry monkeys swarm across a Thai street as rival gangs fight over food after tourists who normally feed them stay away because of coronavirus. And that goes back to being a fin de siècle, even apocalyptic mood afoot when the monkeys are taking over. My grandfather had a few and they bred and once he ended up with 500 and it was equally scary. Political reflections, COVID 2019, new weekly confirmed cases and deaths excluding China. Week 1, 53 cases, 0 deaths. Week 5, 1,257 cases and 21 deaths. Week 7, 20,520 cases and 571 deaths. We're at 57% of week 8. We've got 24,058 cases and 1,080 deaths. And that's what I mean about it being non-linear and exponential. First Wuhan virus case, November 17, 2019. Z locks down Wuhan, January 23rd, 2020. Between Z and Trump, they turned a viral infection into a global pandemic. It takes real skill to do that, says Anil Vora. For 2 months, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, letting the fire spread unchecked. Between Z and Trump, they turned a viral infection into a global pandemic. It takes real skill to do that. And it's ironic, actually, when you sit and take a step back and you look at the similarity. Of course, Z then went totally algorithmic and locked it all down, something Trump has not done. And I wrote about this severally. I said for Trump, it is a mirror image of the risk and trap Z fell into head first. You dilly-dally, you get skewered, and it remains non-linear and exponential. COVID-29 overview as of March 12, 7,273 new coronavirus cases were reported, totaling 45,013 outside China, and there's a doubling every 4 days. That's from Zorina Q. I expect 500,000 to 2 million cases by the end of March. We observe a doubling every 4 days, and this trend is unlikely to be significantly slowing down in the next 19 days. Brazilian government spokesman who met with Trump last weekend was pictured standing next to him as tested positive for coronavirus. This is a B&O desk. And I just said it's frightening for its narcissism, its incompetence, and its Shakespeare-level hubris. And I have to believe Trump has got it. And somebody did some analysis at his last address to the nation. He didn't look good either. Dominic Raab, another fellow who seems to have got it. The Brazilian president, Bolsonaro, is being tested for coronavirus after showing symptoms. He said famously, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Facing coronavirus outbreak, Trump's tactics fall short, Associated Press. They don't fall short. They fall much further than that. The escalating coronavirus crisis is presenting President Trump with a challenge for which he appears ill-equipped, his favorite political tactics ineffective, and his re-election chances in jeopardy, proving particularly vulnerable to a threat that is out of his control. This is the most aggressive and comprehensive effort to confront a foreign virus in modern history, Trump declared. Addressing the economic costs, he added, "This is not a financial crisis. This is just a temporary moment of time that we will overcome together as a nation and as a world." No one believes it's a temporary moment of time. That's his problem. The virus does not have a Twitter account, and unlike so many previous Trump foes, is resistant to political bullying or Republican Party solidarity. Crises of varying degrees produce fascinating and often consequential elections. Think 1816, 1932, 1968, 2008. Such races turn on questions of chaos versus order and favor the candidate who seems to offer the best chance of bringing order to the country in times of uncertainty, presidential historian John Meacham said. As he has so often done before, Trump believed that through his force of will and ability to dominate a new cycle, he would alleviate the crisis, taking both to Twitter and the White House briefing room podium to dismiss the threat. "It will go away, just stay calm," he said on Tuesday after visiting Capitol Hill. "Be calm, it's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen." While Trump deemed the media coverage of the virus a hoax meant to create hysteria and tank his poll numbers, it is a harder sell to ask his supporters to dismiss media reports when they see people in their own communities getting sick, schools closing, and local drugstores unable to keep hand sanitizer on the shelves. Unable to see the spotlight, another fault, Trump spoke extemporaneously to reporters at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta on Friday, requiring the vice president to address the media in Washington moments later to correct the president's misstatements about the availability of testing kits and the fate of a cruise ship filled with coronavirus patients. This virus has no borders, doesn't discern between allies and foes, and attack the nation's health security and economic security is going to take continued bold action from the president. He's not capable of it. He doesn't understand it. "This is something that doesn't hurt and probably actually helps Joe Biden," said Eric Trump. Of course, this works for him on all fronts. "At this moment when there's so much fear in the country and so much fear across the world, we need American leadership," Biden said. "We need presidential leadership that's honest, trusted, truthful, steady, reassuring leadership." Trump cannot provide any of that. As I said severally, it will be a Trump viruside. He's behind the curve, and the curve is parabolic, exponential, and non-linear, and it's over. Will he be remembered as the president that brought us the bear market? Biden is in the lead now. Biden's going to be 10 points clear in a blink of an eye. The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function, Professor Alan Bartlett. Gladwell's tipping point, in a moment in an epidemic when a virus reaches critical mass. It's the boiling point. It's the moment on the graph when the line starts to shoot straight upwards. That moment is coming to Trump. I hope you all realize we're witnessing major history here. This is a shock to the entire system construct. This will take time to repair. As I said, a non-linear and exponential virus represents the greatest risk to a control machine, in point of fact. I wrote about the origin of the coronavirus, and there's a hot debate going on with the Chinese throwing a lot of accusations. I quoted William Burroughs, a paranoid as someone who knows a little of what's going on. I quoted Scott Burke, 777. What are the odds that the SARS-like coronavirus with overlapping genetics from HIV mutated and crossed over into humans next door to a laboratory which had been enhancing coronavirus with HIV for over a decade? And conversely, what are the odds it leaked out of the laboratory? China Foreign Ministry spokesman tweets it might be the US Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Gordon G. Chang, China's foreign ministry, has for all intents and purposes accused the US of committing an act of war. It might be the US Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Be transparent. Make public your data. US owe us an explanation. And that takes me back to what I wrote. If they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. Have a look at an article in Science American, how China's Batwoman hunted down viruses from SARS to the new coronavirus. If coronaviruses were the culprit, she remembers thinking, could they have come from our lab? As I said, viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics and present non-linearity and exponential risks. According to the government data seen by the Post, a 55-year-old from Hubei province could have been the first person to have contracted COVID-19 on November 17. And on the 16th of February in my article, I said University of Toronto researchers' model showed that the epidemic started 1 month earlier than commonly believed. You can't get up to that level of cases if the epidemic started in December, even if you pushed the reproduction high. Iran asked for a loan from the IMF, the first such request since the 1960s. And in my previous article on the occasion of the assassination, I was quoting Hunter S. Thompson, there is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Let's go to the currency markets, which had an incredible session yesterday. Euro 111.85, dollar index 97.449, Japanese yen 105.75, Swiss franc 0.9427, the pound is at 125.87, the Australian dollar 0.6290, India rupee hit a record low 73.925 last, South Korean won 12.1877, Brazilian real has bounced off a record low of 5, Egyptian pound 15.7 and the South African rand 16.467. This is a dollar index chart from Time Action Quant. Make of it what you will. Investors sold gold and bought the dollar. This is from AceMax, and I must say, really undid my gold thesis, but I think that it's not going to get much cheaper than where we are now, I hope. Crude oil getting a little bit of a bounce, $33.10 last, but really there is no demand at all. Emerging markets, the volume of EM outflows for the subset of markets that report daily data is unprecedented, as you can see from the charts. Robin Brooks, IIF. It far exceeds anything seen in the 2013 taper tantrum or even the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. 2nd of September last year, I was writing about the China EM frontier feedback loop phenomenon, is what I called it. And I said this phenomenon has been positive for the last 2 decades, but has now undergone a trend reversal, and that the fallout is being experienced as far away as Germany Inc. I said the Rand is the purest proxy for this phenomenon. African countries, heavily dependent on China being the main taker, are also at the bleeding edge of this phenomenon. The pressure point, I said then, will not ease soon, but will continue to intensify. And to wit, a sudden stop in capital flows is hammering EM, with Brazil's real and Mexico's peso at all-time weak levels. Such sudden stops can have terrible knock-on effects for growth, and what makes this episode so dangerous is that it's global. Brazil's stock market trading halted after 10% fall triggers circuit breaker. Bovespa now down 35% this year, over 45% in dollar terms. That's Reuters' Jamie. And indeed, the viral moment has arrived. And when I wrote that article on the 24th of February and I pointed at the real, it was at 440. It's now yesterday fell below 5. Let's move on to sub-Saharan Africa. Some good news. There's only one stock market left in the world that's up this year. Botswana, says David Inglis. As I said on the 24th of Feb, we are past the point of no return. Viruses do exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. I shared extreme concerns about coronavirus making landfall in Africa with Bruce Whitfield a few weeks ago. I think Epsilon theory's one sentence applies to Africa. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then you get cluster, 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 which is the phase we're currently in. And then the boom. Cases across 12 countries in Africa, and that's probably no longer definitive. This COVID-19 pandemic is a reality we must face up front. That's the head of WHO Africa. I agree with Africa techies, so tired of this blacks are immune from COVID-19 narrative. It's not true and it's dangerous. Please protect yourself. 27th of January, I said I have to assume that the COVID-19 is already in Africa, but just not diagnosed. That's erasing certainty, and I remain of the view that we're just doing a Trump when it comes to the diagnosis. I refer you to my article, Debt, Virus and Locusts Create a Perfect Storm for Africa. The year began with promise, but the year is totally different now, that's for sure. Coronavirus has barely made landfall. When I wrote the article, only 5 countries had reported infections, but I said a virus is in its essence non-linear, exponential, multiplicative, and it would be a Shakespeare-level moment of hubris if policymakers were to pat themselves on the back. Diagnostic kits were only recently availed, and if South Korea tested the same number of people as the entire African continent, they too would be reporting single-digit cases. We all know now what exponential disease propagation looks like in the real world. Real-world exponential growth looks like nothing, 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 then cluster, 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 then boom. And therefore, we will know soon whether we really have dodged the coronavirus infection bullet, which I didn't believe we would. The virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved, and therefore it is a black swan. Fantasy predictions of a V-shaped recovery in China have been dashed. In fact, and I stick by this, China cannot just crank up the factory because that will risk a second round of infections. The country is heavily dependent on China being the main taker of their commodities, are at the bleeding edge. This is crude, copper, coal have crashed more than 20%. They've crashed even further. I said you don't have to be a rocket scientist or an economist to calculate which countries are directly in the line of fire: Angola, Congo, Brazzaville, DRC, Equatorial Guinea, Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa. Adesina said debt is not a problem, it's very bad debt that's a problem. Unfortunately, he's always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we're about to get into a bear market. Sub-Saharan African countries, I said, have gorged on borrowing. The Eurobond markets are now shuttered, essentially. I was talking about the rand being in free fall and having a lot further to fall. Nigeria's oil revenues cratering, $16 billion of hot money parked in short-term certificates, which is all headed for the exit as we speak. I said then a currency devaluation is now predicted and predictable. South Africa, Nigeria and Angola are poised to dive into deep recession. And then I was alerting everyone, East Africa, which had been a bright spot, is under locust attack. I said this is a perfect storm, buckle up and let's stop popping the quaaludes. According to a tweet I saw, and I can't verify it, night of Delta, Naira is at 400. Johannesburg Stock Exchange had its worst plunge in more than 23 years as the coronavirus pandemic continues to plague global markets. That's from Nick Kunze 2. South African All Shares down 22.39% as of this morning. Dollar Rand 16.47, probably going a lot lower, the Rand. Egyptian Pound 1570, EGX 30 down 19.82% year to date. Nigeria's central bank says fundamentals don't support Naira devaluation. Oh well. The bank will launch an investigation along with other agencies to uncover unscrupulous currency traders creating panic with rumors of a devaluation, the bank said in a statement last Thursday. Well, famous last words. Nigerian All Share down 15.45% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange down 2.03% so far this year. Nairobi All Share down 14.99% so far this year. And NSE20 down 15.73% so far this year. Thank you for listening. Wishing you a great weekend.